Hello, my name's Johnno Casson, aka Snippet, and a number of people have asked me to talk a little bit about how Softlad come about, some of the things that I use, some of the techniques I used. I'll take it back a step, if I may. Before the subject matters for songs, for Softlad, or any of the music was recorded, I became a little bit obsessed with sort of FM radio and listening to things through vintage hi-fi. Not always the best hi-fi in the world, but by hook or by crook, getting hold of some cheap 70s hi-fi. Particularly, I got an old amp. I think it was a Technics amp, and it was 1970s, and it was a bit decrepit, but I loved the way things sounded through it. I started listening to FM radio just to hear the sound of what I remembered from when I was young, sort of listening to radio. I've always been a big fan of radio. And I started listening to people like Bill Withers' records through the old amp, and listening to BBC Three shows. There's probably still going now. There's this brilliant show that just captures wonderful sounds. It has songs, it has tracks, but it also has sort of like really quiet moments, and it's just a real stillness to the show that I was obsessed by. I should know the name of that show, shouldn't I? But my memory's like a sieve. And there was another one. There was a great jazz show on. I don't know if it was also on BBC Radio 3 that I was listening to. Just was kind of obsessed a little bit with sort of old tape-to-tape sound, analog sound. And I know when I started the albums, when I started Softlad, one of the first tracks I recorded was Sometimes I Fade. And I loved how I could just run the bass track through an old vintage Tascam, M06 mixer, I think it was. Really old, really bit broken down, but just running it through an old piece of equipment, how that can change the sound. You can't put your finger on quite what it's changing if you don't really know the words for it, if you don't know the terminology. I'm not trained. I have always done everything by ear. It's often said in my family, train your ears, trust your ears, is my saying, because for all these years of making music, you're forever learning, you're forever a sponge and soaking it all in. And so I always trust what my ears tell me, and I follow them. And before it all started, it was sort of like listening to, even there was a kind of like a soul and funk show that I was listening to on BBC Essex of a Sunday afternoon, but only through FM radio, and recording it on cassettes, and listening to stuff on cassettes as well. Stuff that had been hidden away for years that I'd recorded years ago, or like an old friend of mine, Vince, had recorded me lots of mixtapes, and I still had them, and I loved them because they just had something. Even if you didn't still love the music, you loved everything about the time they were recorded. They were given to you as a gift, and I loved that. And that the idea of summing, looking into it, to produce a certain sort of sound that you want. You know, when you listen to tunes from the 70s, you can't go back and go into those studios, because what can you do at home in a tiny room without much money at all?